Hi there, it's Rachel Thexton, host of Rachel Thexton Connects. I wanted to talk for a few minutes today about a topic that we kind of glaze over, but don't really go into much depth on. And that is the toxic workplace, the corporate environment, what we tolerate and should not, how we may treat others or accept treatment that we should not. It was around 2015 when I went public via social media and media regarding my struggles with mental health and substance use challenges. I was afraid to do this, but I felt like it was important to do because I believed, and I still believe today, that substance use challenges hide out in the corporate space. There are companies who have very large HR manuals and policies about how an individual will be supported should they have challenges with substances and mental health. And that may indeed be the case to some degree, but there is still a huge amount of judgment, stereotype, and stigma associated with this. And I can tell you from experience that this is still true. Now, my experiences did happen more than 10 years ago. So my hope is that there has been some progression during that time. But I can speak to my experience in 2015, 2016, when I took a break from my business to get well. And I have to say that the majority of the community at whole, including the corporate community, were supportive. Most said nothing, negative or positive, which was completely fine. But there were a few individuals, senior level executives that many would know, who judged, who started to treat me differently, who approached me differently. You know, I have evaluated in my mind whether this is to do with my own paranoia or my own insecurities about how I felt about myself at that time and how I felt about others potentially judging me. And perhaps I'm fabricating this in my mind, but there were certainly instances where this is not the case, where even though I had been a professional who had delivered excellent results to clients for a very long time and worked very hard, I was always kind and did my very best as a contractor and as a professional, things changed. The way I was approached and the way in which I was not approached, the way in which I was spoken to and treated, things changed. I mention this because I'm currently working on a client where toxic workplaces are a topic that we're discussing and pitching to media. And there's data that has come out that speaks to the fact that many in Canada feel as though they're in a toxic environment. They're either being bullied or harassed or belittled, or perhaps they're being, not given credit for work in which they have completed. There's a lot of competitive environment, a lot of ego in the environment. And often these toxic workplaces, I find, I've owned my own business now and then prior to that co-owned for a long time. But so my experience within an organization and working within a large organization is limited. But I found from observing and hearing from peers, colleagues, and friends, that a toxic environment in the workplace often comes from someone at the top. When you find a workplace in which people are happy, they are productive, they are positive, they are supportive of one another, etc., this is often coming from the top. This is leadership that is embodying these values and ethics. And the opposite is true as well when it comes to judgment, overworking, burnouts, unrealistic expectations. At the end of the day, we spend a very large amount of our time working, sometimes in the workplace at an office or remotely amongst colleagues and clients. So this is a significant amount of our time. And how we feel during that time affects our mental and physical health. There's an endless number of books that have been written about the effects of stress on your physical health and, well, mental health. You know, my friend Sachin Lati, who's about to embark on a very admirable cross-country run for mental health, calls mental health kind of like the modern day cancer. It is something that's so prevalent, yet in the case of mental health, which is sometimes associated with substance use, as we sometimes try to self-medicate our mental health, it's stigmatized to the point that people hide it. People do not come forward. They don't seek help. They feel judged. And I can say from my experience that now in 2025, I am a successful professional. My business is very busy. And I'm so grateful and fortunate to have the business that I do. Wonderful clients, amazing contractors and colleagues that I work with. And I have been fortunate to be able to pivot my business in a way and have a level of success and number of clients that allow me to say and evaluate a client, is this going to be a healthy client for me? And the same should be done if you're in a workplace or evaluating a new professional space. Is this going to be a healthy environment for me? It is just as important, in my opinion, as how much will I be making or what are opportunities for growth, because we don't know if we'll be here tomorrow. You know, I know that sounds like a cliche and, but we need to really evaluate how we're spending our time in the workplace. And I know that when corporate leaders treated me with judgment, looked at me differently, it hurt. It did. I'd like to say that I was thick-skinned and mature enough to say that's their problem and I moved on, but it did hurt. I felt sad, I felt angry, I felt disappointed. It's part of the reason why I started the podcast, was to try to do my small, tiny part in breaking down stigmas and stereotypes associated with things like substance use and mental health challenges. So I share that today in a place where I have been through tough times with toxicity amongst professionals, and it's not okay. It really isn't. It requires my advice if you run into those situations, if you're in a workplace or you have a client, is to really kind of first, after an incident or an occurrence takes place, to really calm yourself and take some time to breathe and let it sit in and really think about it, evaluate it. And then you need to take action. That action and how that looks for you is going to be very different depending on the circumstance. But I share this vulnerable piece of my history with you because I think it's just so important that we are in workplaces that respect us. And they not only respect us when we are producing like mad, when we are doing amazing work consistently, but they respect us when we're not well and when we need a break and when we need some time to heal. And it's vital. So I share that with you today as maybe just something to think about in your workplace, in your work life. How does that look for you? Do you feel at peace? Do you feel respected? Do you feel honored? Do you feel appreciated? You should. And I hope that you do. Thanks so much for listening. And I look forward to announcing my next guest coming up soon on Rachel Bexton Connects.